We're actually going into the grounds of St Mary's Church at Fulmodeston in Norfolk, a church which sadly was shut down in about 1880. There were two churches, the other one was St John the Baptist. Both churches were declared redundant, two further afield from the local parish. So by closing these two churches and actually taking the roofs off the churches and removing all of the furniture, they were able to build a third church as a replacement in between the two existing ruins as they are now. And so this church has stood here as a ruin since, as I say, the late 1880s. It's a very dangerous site. I considered that perhaps we may come here and do an investigation later, but quite frankly I think the structure is too dangerous. I think these walls are being supported by the ivy that's just literally clinging it together, and as you can see underfoot it is complete and utter dereliction. There are nettles everywhere, bramble. And such a sad state of affairs. We're coming into the chancel through the bell tower. As you can see ahead of me is Eddie.
Oh yeah.
And if we look down here, if I can get that, you can see one of the grave plates which has just been literally left here. I don't know who is actually buried here, but John Brown I think his name, and by the date it looks as though he died in the 17th century. Let's have a little wander around, just show, and I'll speak to Eddie. I'm using the GoPro 4 on a gimbal to give you some idea of what this place looks like. You can see all around the undergrowth there's a dead tree lying inside. There are literally plants and brambles and all kinds of obstructions lying on the floor. The tower is still standing. Unfortunately, like the rest of the church walls here, it's completely covered in ivy, and ivy seems to be the only support that these walls now have. Quite clearly, if you walk around inside, you can see there's quite large gaping holes. There is a staircase there which I certainly wouldn't want to venture up. It's just a very, very sad state of affairs. And all this was done deliberately by the church commissioners. It seems hard to believe that such an early church as this would suffer the fate that so many other churches in Norfolk appear to have suffered. We were considering this as a night investigation, but quite frankly, I would say it's far too dangerous underfoot. And so here we are inside St Mary's Church, Fulmodeston in Norfolk. A sad state of affairs, and perhaps one of the worst ruins that I've actually come across. But it has a haunted reputation. Apparently in 2005 a group of hikers came upon this church ruin and smelt the smell of sulphur, and allegedly saw a mist appear in front of them in the bushes. When they reached the inside of the church, they saw a figure of a man in the tower, and the figure disappeared. The unusual thing was, of course, the figure was seen at the top of the tower, and of course there's no flooring inside the tower itself. Unfortunately, because of the parlous state of the tower, there's absolutely no way that any of us are going to risk going up the top to venture, but it appears that there is no upper flooring, although I can't confirm it. But coming back to this haunted reputation, if that be the case, how would they know that there was a figure peering out to them from the tower itself? It's completely covered in ivy. I have no doubt that this place is haunted. I certainly feel a presence is around us as we're wandering through. It's not unpleasant. I don't feel anything negative as suggested apparently by the smell of sulphur, but I can say that it has a particularly almost sad state of affairs about it, as though it's just been lost and abandoned. You can feel that sadness, that loss, and just wandering around inside, and one or two places you can actually see the remains of nameplates. You can't see anything on them, but the nameplates are still there. So when you think that all those people that came here to be buried, expecting this church to last well into the 20th century, 21st century, to actually know that this beloved church is now but a ruin, it must be very sad for them in spirit. It must be very, very hard to accept. I personally don't consider this site to be a safe place to investigate at night, only because of the parlour state of the building and the undergrowth. And of course Eddie has a disability which could affect him at night, particularly coming through. So what we're going to do, we're going to do an impromptu daytime investigation using the GoPro, and then later we're going to Baconsford Castle, a place that we've been to before, which has been very interesting for us in the past. We picked up some very unusual activity, and we're hoping that by going there tonight, particularly in this really, really hot day, that we're going to pick up something worthwhile to share. But for now, we're just going to wander around the ruins and hopefully pick up something of some interest. Okay, Eddie, we're inside. What do you think of the state of the place, and what are you actually feeling?
Sad, really, isn't it? The place looks absolutely beautiful, and yet it's just let to go to ruin.
It's very dangerous in here as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's dangerous, it's just the actual flooring. The flooring is with the actual bits of concrete. That's the bad side of it. Don't think any of the walls are going to fall down or any day soon.
Well, not unless they take the ivy away.
But it's just sort of, I will agree. I mean, there was a lot of trip hazards.
Yeah,
So
it's not going to be a safe spot to carry out an investigation.
Absolutely.
It's certainly atmospheric, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
You can't imagine any place like this anywhere at all in this particular condition, but here it is. There are no signposts coming here. It was just up a side track at the back of a country house. We're half expecting at some point the local farmer to ask what we're doing here, but we'll deal with that when we get to it.
Yeah.
The actual land it's resting on, the cemetery, as you saw, is completely overgrown, and the stones are falling over. It's just like a whole community of people here have been forgotten, Eddie.
Oh, totally. It's so sad. As you said, you expect when you get buried in a graveyard, you've got to stay there all that time and have people seeing your graves and that. Come to the church, gone.
Everything's gone, yeah.
So sad. So very sad.
So anyway, what we're going to do, we're going to wander around the churchyard, what's left of it, and hopefully pick up some EVP. Apparently, I've been told through various sources that there might be children, spirits of children afoot. Apparently there is a group of children buried here that died of scarlet fever. Perhaps they might come through. But there's not really much else I can add to it. I could give you a much more detailed, in-depth history of the church, but I don't think it's really required here. We know it dates from roughly the 10th century onwards, and we know that it was actively maintained and used until eventually they decided to abandon this church along with St. John's the Baptist at Croxton. And this is what we're left with.
So sad.
Okay, let's go forward. You'll have to forgive the wind, it's a little bit breezy here today, so what we're going to do is stand to the other side of the church out of the wind. About here would be fine. We come here in love, light and peace. We mean you no harm and disrespect. We are certainly saddened to see the state of your church and what it's in today in 2018 to when it was closed in 1880. We just wondered if there's anybody here who would like to say something to us. My name is Chris and here is Eddie.
I'm Eddie.
There's a noise in the background. It's possibly aircraft, but
Yeah.
it's always the way when you're recording EVP. The 21st century somehow creeps up upon you. When we look around, we can see some of the headstones here. They're quite interesting. Got a man here by the name of George Avey. He died, I believe, 1816. Then we have to the memory of George Prittingall, who died in 1861 here, and his daughter Frances, who's also buried here. I don't know whether you folks would want to say anything. We're not here to cause you any offence. Look at the outside of these walls. You fitting anything, Eddie?
Not really. Had one hit as I was coming out.
On the doorway, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt that.
Hit. But other than that,
You had a hit on the doorway, yeah?
Yeah, I've seen nothing other than that. It would be interesting, I must admit, to... I was thinking how far is it from here to the castle?
I'm not sure, maybe 10 miles, 10, 12 miles.
Damn. Oh well, I made a mistake. I should have brought a little miniature recorder.
I've got plenty of recording equipment, so...
Put one in here and then come back to the church.
Ooh,
Or would you say it's a waste of time?
I think it might... I'm not feeling anything terribly bad here.
Not,
You know,
not overwhelming.
when you consider the legend reports about the smell of sulphur, and we're not smelling sulphur, we haven't seen any grey mists, and we certainly haven't seen anyone in the tower. And how anyone could have stood inside the tower is beyond me, as you can see from the video.
Mhm.
But we'll continue around the cemetery. This is quite an early one. Unfortunately, I believe it's Elizabeth. I can't even read that very clearly, nor the date. Seems like we've got helicopters flying above us now. It's like something from a horror film.
You could easily make one here.
Oh, you could easily shoot a horror film here, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Complete and utter dereliction. Wander around there a little bit. Oh, two skulls. There's two people buried here. These are definitely 18th century grave furniture. There's no actual date, but by the artistry on the stones, I would date it probably to the, oh yeah, we got a date here, 1760 something. So yeah, about the mid 18th century. And it's actually in very good condition, as you can see here. So a lot of history. See if we can get through around here, Eddie. Oh no, that doesn't look likely, but Eddie turned up today wearing a pair of shorts.
Yeah.
That was obviously not a good sign, because when you turn up expecting it to be quite easy to walk through, it never is it?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if we go to the castle,
We're going to go to the castle.
He might have a chance because it's so hot.
He's going to expose his legs to
He
the
may
world.
not have a kilt, but he may have a pair of shorts.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we can get through here, but we'll give it a try. Okay, this is Robert Ritchie's. He was buried in 1885. This must have been one of the last burials here, because it's certainly not in use today as a burial site. And his wife Barbara is buried over here. And let's go back inside the nave and see if we can get any EVP there, because it's too windy to go around the other side of the church. Okay, we'll go back there. Yeah, well, it's too windy as well. Okay, Eddie's just wandering off there in the background. As you can see, it certainly has ambience. I can see by the undergrowth here that people do come here fairly regularly, because it's well pushed down. But we're going back inside the church again. Apparently there was a bequest made in 1450 to ensure the upkeep of the tower, which might be an explanation as to why the tower's still standing, because most derelict churches tend to lose their towers much earlier on, either being struck by lightning or actually the substructure collapsing. We're going to go back inside again. Yeah, I'm almost tripping over here. There's a lot of stones on the ground. It's really a hard hat area, to be honest, and I'm wearing a soft hat. As you can see, just looking around, as I'm getting to the altar area, I'm feeling a change in temperature, as it were, in temperament. You often, when visiting churches, regardless of whether or not they're currently in use, but whenever you get to the altar area, there is often a change of feeling, a change of emotional feelings inside the building. A very holy, a very respectful area of the church. And yet here I'm standing here amongst all the debris which is scattered across the grounds, a branch from a tree. But the atmosphere has certainly changed here. And it's not negative at all. It's more of idle curiosity. And if we look up here, and I was talking earlier, this was obviously part of a monument plate. This is the lower half. The upper half is long since gone. It was probably made of marble. And what we're left with is the support bracket, which is still here. But as you can see the outline of where the plaque originally stood. And a similar event across to the other side. You can see a slight hole in the wall, and you can see a bracket across the top. The windows here mostly appear to be from the 15th century. You can tell by the thick and heavy tracery in the windows. So this is it's not a bad quality build, it's quite a good quality structure. And it's got a very impressive tower, if only you could actually see it. But yes, I'm quite impressed with the ruin, but I'm very sad that it is a ruin. There's, again, another monument to somebody who's buried here. But again, there was something which stood here. It's now been torn away. As you can see, the walls are largely made of flint, with stucco plaster over the top. Now I'm feeling somebody. I keep being drawn. Do you ever get that? Is your attention drawn to the entrance as you come through the bell tower?
I had an absolute chronic chest pain as I walked
Yeah.
through.
And what did you feel?
Just came through the entrance and it was like bang, straight in the chest. And I thought, ooh, he's had a heart attack.
And you felt that through the entranceway as I did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really painful.
I'm completely drawn back to it. I keep feeling there's somebody there watching us all of the time. And even when I was talking about what my observations of the church was, my attention was constantly darting back to that particular area. Kind of weird, isn't it? There's a very narrow lancet window in the corner. I think that is what was identified by archaeologists as dating back to the 10th century period. It's been bricked in and plastered over. But one I was actually drawn to initially was over here. I can't get to it, but a strange smell. Yeah, a foul smell. Anyway, I'll come back to that.
Can't smell anything.
Over here, I think at one point was a piscina, which was an offertory, which was left there for people to pay penance to the church, to support the church as it was during the medieval period. Let's go back to the tower, Eddie. It's all right. And you got that plate, yeah. I saw this when I first came in, and it's virtually a complete grave plate. But it's, as you can see, it's subsided slightly. None of this floor is level.
1600.
Yeah, 1600, yeah, 17th century. Okay, let's go back to the tower. It's a strong breeze, so you're going to have to stand over here, Ed, in the corner. Well, it doesn't help with me standing in the doorway. Okay, I've moved just to the side of the doorway. There's a strong draft, but it's in this area I keep feeling there's somebody standing here watching. And if we look over here, we can show the steps leading up to the tower, but you can't get to it. But before then, can you raise the camera up to the top of the tower, Eddie? As you can see, there's no way that anyone could physically get to the very roof of the tower, but it still has a roof. It's not roofless, as the legend dictates. I certainly wouldn't want to wander up there. And if we look, if we just come back over here, this is the doorway leading into the tower. Part of the wall structure is missing. There's a large hole here. And can you get the steps on there? I'm not sure whether you can. You can just about see them.
Nice sort of hook just here. Nice sort of hook to the doorway.
Yeah. Oh, a hook, yeah, doorway. Yeah, it goes right to the top, but it doesn't lead out onto anything. It's just an empty space. Okay. I think there's very little more. Sorry. I think there's very little more than we can actually do here, other than the fact that it is a magnificent ruin. You can certainly see its 15th century heritage in the windows, in the tracery of the windows. The 15th century, they tend to be rather thick bars that were built into the window frames. In the Victorian era, they tended to be much lighter because they were supported with metal. These were obviously cut from rough stone and put into place. There are a number of blocked up doorways inside the church, which may have led to other chapels which are no longer here, but that's all we can say about this wonderful place. And what a beautiful place it is. It is very, very beautiful, but it's very sad. For now, we have to say goodbye to this beautiful place. St Mary's Church at Fulmodeston in Norfolk. And I wouldn't recommend anybody coming up here, by the way. It's very dry at the moment, very lumpy ground, but in the winter it must be an absolutely mud mire. It must be a mud bath trying to drive up here. But we're lucky today to be able to be here.
The whole thing has just been left a ruin. It's just absolutely horrific. To think this was done intentionally. I mean, it's to let the roof disperse by itself, go decay by itself, okay, but to literally take the whole roof off, that just doesn't make sense.
Seems pointless, doesn't it?
It does.
I think they were basically trying to keep the cost down by reusing some of the materials from the church, perhaps from the roof.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be. No way of saying.
Have you enjoyed your wanderings around here today?
Yeah, it's been interesting. When you were doing your talk, I heard a voice while you were doing the talk there. And so there is an EVP on there, and heard it quite loud as a man's voice.
Well, let's hope we've got something on
that.
camera. We've had a little wander around the cemetery. Perhaps there may be something there, perhaps something inside the church chancel itself. It's rather the nave of the church, I should say.
Yeah, it's definitely a voice on there. I heard it quite plainly and quite loud. So you should get that very good. I'd be surprised if it's not on there anyway.
Oh, me too. Well, thanks for that, Eddie. I really appreciate your input. It's been interesting. And now we'll have a break and we'll wander off to Beaconsthorpe.
One of the places that I absolutely love.
Yeah, as you will see later. Okay, well, last words there from Eddie. So we're going to vacate this site, move on to our next goal, and hopefully tonight be able to provide some interesting paranormal activity. But we'll have to say goodbye to Fulmodeston, I'm afraid. Okay.